Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really tearing into a relationship that's incredibly volatile, strategically vital to in the Horn of Africa. We're talking Eritrea and Ethiopia, specifically looking at everything since 2018. It's a period defined, really, by this highly personal, very transactional, and frankly often reckless dynamic between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and President Isaias Afwerki.
You're right. This isn't your standard diplomacy playbook. Not at all. The sources we've looked at confirm this whole relationship, it's built on pretty shaky ground. Think opportunistic alliances followed by, well, dramatic breakdowns.
Right.
And if you want the short version, it's basically a temporary truce driven by hating the TPLF, which is papered over this ticking time bomb underneath about Assad and sea access. It swings wildly, cooperation 1 minute, hostility the next.
Driven by two main things, as you said.
Yeah, fundamentally two things. First, that deep mutual strategic hatred for the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF. And second, Ethiopia's constant nagging demand for sea access. That's never gone away.
Okay, so our mission today for you, the listener, is to unpack exactly how the situation unfolded. We've kind of broken this down into 4 key phases, tracing the path from that, much celebrated peace deal in 2018.
The one that got Abiy the Nobel Prize.
Exactly. From that, through a devastating war pact, and now landing us squarely in a situation where, honestly, there's a very real risk of renewed conflict. We need to understand why those core issues, those rivalries, were never really sorted out.
Never truly addressed.
Let's kick off with 2018, that initial thaw. We're calling it the transaction of convenience. And this, it really did stun a lot of people. Abiy Ahmed completely flips Ethiopian policy on its head.
A huge reversal.
Announces he's willing, unconditionally, to fully implement the 2002 Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission ruling, the EEBC ruling.
Which was massive. For 16 years, Ethiopia had just refused to implement it. That refusal kept them locked in that awful no war, no peace stalemate. So Abiy suddenly saying yes in 2018. That formally ended the stalemate.
And yes, as you mentioned, landed him the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. But, okay, we need to look beyond the headlines, beyond the handshakes. What were the real drivers here?
Well, the biggest one, maybe the most profound, was that shared enemy.
The TPLF. Existential for both leaders, they saw it as an adversary they absolutely had to deal with.
Exactly. But beneath that, especially for Ethiopia, was this huge economic pressure.
Right. The sea access issue again?
Absolutely. Ethiopia's been landlocked since Eritrea became independent back in '93. And just relying on Djibouti's port, it was, frankly, crippling their economy. The cost was immense. Sources estimate somewhere between, $1.5 to $2 billion every year?
Wow. So getting seaport access wasn't just a nice-to-have for Abiy. It was a core strategic goal. He wasn't exactly subtle about it either.
Not at all. And this is where his language gets really, really interesting. He didn't just talk about, cooperation or port usage agreements.
No, he went further. He publicly said something much more fundamental. The quote that really jumped out was, "When Isaias and I are added together, we share Assab."
We share Assab. Think about that. That's not asking for docking rights. That sounds a lot like a claim to shared sovereignty over a key Eritrean port. Right from the start.
And Isaias Afwerki in Eritrea, he seemed prepared to stomach that, at least initially.
It seems so. For him, this deal was a potential lifeline, a chance to break out of being seen as this international pariah, and maybe more importantly, a chance to settle his own very long-standing scores with the TPLF. It felt very much like a quid pro quo.
But the sources really hammer home just how fragile this whole arrangement was, how quickly it soured. That initial excitement, it basically evaporated by late 2018, early 2019.
Oh, very quickly. In fact, those land borders that were open with such fanfare, Eritrea slammed them shut again in December 2018.
That's incredibly fast, just months. What drove that?
It really highlights the fundamental incompatibility between their political systems. Abiy was, trying to push some domestic reforms, liberalization. Eritrea, on the other hand, is this highly centralized, tightly controlled state built on indefinite military service.
So the open borders were a problem.
A huge problem for Asmara. The main reason they closed them wasn't just some minor diplomatic issue. It was because thousands of Eritreans started leaving, fleeing the system, an exodus. And the Eritrean government saw that immediately as a, quote, destabilizing threat. Abiy's opening up was fundamentally clashing with Afwerki's need for control.
So the peace essentially failed because it exposed these deep internal contradictions, and it proved just how transactional it all was. Key issues were just left hanging.
Completely unresolved. That formal border demarcation the EEBC ruled on never happened. Did Ethiopia actually pull its troops back from those contested areas? Nope.
So it wasn't a real legally binding peace then?
Not really. More like a strategic political arrangement, just, waiting for the next trigger, waiting for a crisis.
And that crisis arrived November 2020. That tactical alignment they'd sort of patched together in 2018 just exploded.
This brings us to phase 2, the Strategic War Pact from 2020 to 2022. Yeah, the underlying tension just boiled over into full-blown war. And that shared enemy, the TPLF, it became the absolute focus. It transformed the relationship into this strategic military alliance specifically designed to crush Tigrayan power.
This was the peak of their cooperation, right?
Absolutely the zenith. All the historical friction, the border disputes, the port issue, all temporarily pushed aside for this one shared goal: neutralize the TPLF.
And the military collaboration was intense. We've seen evidence confirming Eritrean forces, the EDF, were fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Ethiopian army, the ENDF, launching attacks from Eritrea into Tigray, occupying huge areas.
Unprecedented coordination for its time.
But this alliance, this war pact, it came at an absolutely horrific cost, didn't it? It drew massive international condemnation.
It certainly did. The sources are very clear on this. The alliance was deeply marred by widespread allegations of war crimes, serious human rights abuses, and Eritrean forces were specifically implicated in many of the worst accounts.
Things like
Reports detailed extrajudicial killings on a large scale and the widespread use of sexual violence as a weapon. Really horrific stuff.
Is there a specific incident the sources highlight?
Well, the Axum massacre sticks out. Late November 2020. The numbers vary, but reports suggest anywhere from 100 to possibly 800 civilians were killed there, reportedly by EDF soldiers.
Just awful.
And it wasn't just isolated incidents. The UN even reported that Eritrean forces often seem to be operating independently, pursuing their own objectives separate from Ethiopian command structures. It suggested their aims maybe went beyond just helping Abiy defeat the TPLF.
And this led to real consequences.
Yes. Eventually, the U.S. imposed economic sanctions specifically targeting Eritrea's military and its ruling party in November 2021. The international pressure was significant.
Okay, which brings us to the moment this whole war pact just completely disintegrated. Phase 3. The unraveling and the betrayal. This centers around late 2022. The alliance was tactical, and the second diplomacy seemed to achieve the main goal. It just shattered.
Instantly. Precisely. The trigger, the catalyst, was the signing of the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement, the COHAC, or the Pretoria Agreement as it's often called. That was November 2nd, 2022, between Abiy's government and the TPLF.
And the crucial detail here:
Eritrea was cut out. Completely excluded from the talks, from the final deal.
excluded from the peace deal after they'd fought and bled alongside Ethiopia. I mean, that sounds like
A fundamental betrayal. That's certainly how Asmari viewed it. Prime Minister Abiy, by essentially neutralizing the TPLF as a major military force through this agreement, had effectively removed the only thing holding his alliance with Isaias Afwerki together.
he removed the shared enemy.
Exactly. And that created this immediate, very dangerous political vacuum between them.
But even after the agreement was signed, Eritrean troops didn't just pack up and leave Tigray, did they?
No, they didn't. Reports indicate that even after Pretoria, Eritrean forces stayed in parts of Tigray for months, well into 2023, and allegations of atrocities continued during that period too.
What did that signal?
It signaled that Eritrea had its own agenda, that its strategic priority, as sources put it, of finishing the TPLF, or at least permanently weakening it, now trumped whatever diplomatic path Ethiopia was trying to forge. The partnership was clearly dead, but Eritrea's own objectives were still very much in play.
And that vacuum, the one left when the TPLF was removed as the common enemy, it got filled pretty quickly, didn't it? Filled by that core structural tension we talked about right at the start.
Yep, filled entirely by the Red Sea Rivalry. Which brings us to the current phase, phase 4, the geopolitical pivot back to Red Sea Rivalry.
They're basically back to square one, but maybe even more dangerous now.
Arguably, yes. We've reverted to the most fundamental point of friction. Ethiopia, under Abiy, has doubled down on securing sea access. It's been framed as this nationalistic, almost sacred objective. He's called it an existential issue, a matter of national survival.
And the language he's using now is way beyond just needing port access. It shifted dramatically from 2018.
Oh, significantly. It went from sharing Assab in 2018 to demanding something much more assertive by 2023. His statements became openly aggressive, explicitly targeting Assab.
Saying things like,
Saying it's a matter of time before Ethiopia regains access. describing the loss of the port back in '93 as a mistake that needs to be, and this is a direct quote, corrected tomorrow.
I mean, calling the independence of a sovereign neighbor a mistake to be corrected, that's incredibly inflammatory language.
It's a direct threat, an undeniable challenge to Eritrean sovereignty. And predictably, President Afwerki's response has been just as firm. He's asserted that Eritrea's control over its ports is, quote, inalienable and exclusive, non-negotiable.
So it's become a zero-sum game again.
Completely. And this divergence, this clash, hasn't just stayed rhetorical. Eritrea has apparently called Ethiopia's ambitions misguided, outdated, and more concerningly, there are reports of serious Eritrean military mobilization near the border.
And here's where the sheer transactional nature of this relationship gets almost dizzying. We're now seeing reports suggesting Eritrea might be secretly exploring, get this, a tactical alliance with factions of the TPLF.
Their sworn enemy from the war pact.
Exactly. The idea being to undermine Abiy's Red Sea plans by potentially supporting his enemies inside Ethiopia. It's like the enemy of my current enemy is potentially my new temporary friend.
It shows just how fluid and purely interest-driven these alignments are. And the hard data. It backs up this picture of collapsed cooperation. Actual trade between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Sources confirm it's declined significantly from the already low levels of 2018 through to 2023.
So no real economic integration happened.
None to speak of. It confirms the relationship is still defined almost entirely by strategic competition, not any kind of sustainable partnership.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. Looking at this whole chaotic period, 2018 to now, what's the single biggest takeaway you want listeners to grasp?
I think the main lesson is just how completely opportunistic that initial 2018 alliance was. It was held together by one thing and one thing only, the TPLF as a common threat. The second that threat was removed, or at least significantly weakened.
It didn't lead to lasting peace.
Not at all. It immediately plunged the relationship back into this incredibly dangerous phase where those fundamental structural rivalries, primarily over territory and sea access, have resurfaced with a vengeance. It was never, ever about genuine reconciliation.
Which leaves us where we are now, a highly volatile situation. And the sources seem to suggest the most dangerous and maybe plausible scenario is actually renewed open conflict, driven by this rhetoric around Assad.
It's a definite risk.
So we've established this relationship is driven by powerful rhetoric, by these individual leaders' calculations. If you are a listener watching this space closely, what are the key indicators? What should you look for that might signal actual military confrontation is becoming more likely?
Well, the sources point to two really critical things to watch. First, listen for explicit, sustained statements from high-level Ethiopian officials, not just Abiy, but others too, stating they intend to regain sovereign control over Assad. The key word there is sovereign control, not just access.
Okay, so the specific language matters. What's the second indicator?
That rhetoric needs to be paired with verified reports, and verification is key here, of significant Ethiopian troops and heavy armed movements towards the Eritrean border. Movements that go clearly beyond routine patrols or defensive postures.
Rhetoric plus significant verified deployments.
Exactly. Those two together would be a very serious warning sign.
Right. And maybe here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. We know both Abiy and Afwerki are dealing with pretty serious pressures at home. Abiy's got ongoing internal conflicts, ethnic tensions. Afwerki runs a state built on indefinite conscription, facing a potentially restive population.
Both face domestic challenges, yes.
So what are the chances that these internal pressures might actually push one or both leaders towards an external conflict, towards this fight over the Red Sea as a way to, rally their populations, create national unity around this idea of national survival? That's certainly something worth keeping a close eye on.